This is the announced within the last 24 hours new criteria of how European Ryder Cup qualification will go. Only one Ryder Cup points list. Remember, there used to be a DP World Tour points list and a so-called World points list. And from what we understand, these are changes that were driven by the captain that you see there, Luke Donald. 5,000 points for major championships, 3,000 points for the players, signature events, and FedEx Cup playoffs. 2,000 points for DP World Tour Rolex Series events. 2,000 points for 2025 PGA Tour regular FedEx Cup events. 1,500 points for DP World Tour back nine events. 1,000 points for DP World Tour Global Series events. These are basically based upon purse sizes and the importance that they place on the regular ones. 1,000 points for a 2025 PGA Tour opposite field event. So the teams will be the top six from points, and then, of course, the six captains' picks. That's based upon what Luke wants to do for his team. Eligibility, and this is the devil in the detail, right? This is what I was talking about before the break. Must be European as defined by the IGF and must be in membership of the DP World Tour. Qualification concludes on Sunday, the 24th of August in 2025, so that they can compete at Bethpage Black. Okay, a couple of different observations. One is, for years, the DP World Tour, formerly called the European Tour, has maintained the posture that, look, we don't claim to be the PGA Tour. We get that the PGA Tour is larger purses. We get that the best players in the world, by and large, want to go to principally the United States and play on the PGA Tour. We accept that. But if a player is looking to stay, players from, say, Europe, because that's the context of our discussion right now, if a player is from Europe and they want to play closer to home, and they want to see and experience a variety of countries and cultures as they play, then the DP World Tour is a pretty good option. Along the way, the DP World Tour, whether it was their Rolex events, which were rolled out with great fanfare, that have greatly been restricted as of late, and that's a matter of where you're at in terms of sponsors and who wants to be behind it, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, those are the realities of the world that we live in. So they're doing what they had to do. Remember, this is impacted by a lot of things, including how COVID impacted the game at a professional level, et cetera. You could argue to say, well, how much does LIV have to do with that? Don't know, but it would be an interesting discussion to have about whether taking some of the stars, and there were a good number of big names from predominantly the DP World Tour that went to LIV. Did that hurt the strength of field? Does that hurt sponsors who otherwise might have been hanging around and saying, yeah, but you don't have as much of the star power as you had at the top tier? I'm not sure that's as relative now as it was even just a couple of years ago when players started to sign to the other tour, because some of those players were already getting a little bit long in the tooth, and even more so at this juncture. But the point structure is the thing that I wanted to start with, because now it's not question of just theory. This is the European Tour, or let me phrase it so I'm using the correct terminology. This is the European Ryder Cup, which is under the umbrella and administration of the DP World Tour, formerly known as the European Tour, saying this is where we view our events relative to the importance of a PGA Tour event. They also obviously did it relative to the importance of a major and the players and signature events and FedEx Cup playoffs. And what they're basically saying is that the most points that you can get, and Dom, do me a favor and pull up for DP World Tour Rolex Series events so I know which events they are specifically, because I don't have direct recall, obviously, as it wraps up the end of the year, et cetera. But I'd like to know specifically, event by event, what we're talking about here. Because what we're looking at here is 5,000 points for a major championship. Fine, fair enough. You want a major champion to be on your team. I get it. 3,000 points for the players, signature events, and the FedEx Cup playoffs. Now, the only thing that I'm surprised by is that they don't give, like, you don't see anywhere in that chart where they're giving points for someone who wins the FedEx Cup at the end of it. You won the FedEx Cup, congratulations, because those events also fall under signature events. So you're going to get at least 3,000 points if you win a signature event, but theoretically you could win the FedEx Cup and not win a playoff event. Right? Theoretically, you can do it. I mean, the fact that Scotty has a shot is reality. But nonetheless, the reason why I'm saying that is I would think I would have put in, if you won the race to Dubai, that would have been a 3,000 point bonus. Right? And maybe they're looking at going, hey, look, if you won the race to Dubai, you're playing well enough that you're going to have enough points to qualify anyway. So you don't need to worry about that. 2,000 points for a DP World Tour Rolex Series event. So what they're saying is that the biggest events during the run of the season on the DP World Tour I'm using their point structure. This is their point structure, are 2/3 of the value of the players or any of the signature events or the FedEx Cup playoffs, which are signature events. 2/3. Dom, what are the 5 Rolex Series events on the DP World Tour right now?
The first one is the Hero Dubai Desert Classic, which takes place in January. Ironically, Rory McIlroy won that this year. The next one is the Genesis Scottish Open, which historically was won in incredible fashion this year by Bob McIntyre. These are all of these events, by the way, have $9 million purses, which is really what all this is based around. And then you have, of course, the BMW PGA Championship, which is coming up later on in September. And then they wrap this season up in November with back-to-back Rolex Series events, the Abu Dhabi HSBC Championship, followed by their tour championship, the DP World Tour Championship, where they crown their Race to Dubai champion. So those are the 5 events that are Rolex Series events that, on that graphic we showed you, are worth 2,000 points over the course of the Ryder Cup qualification.
Got it. Hero Dubai Desert Classic, the Scottish Open, the BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth, the Abu Dhabi HSBC, the World Tour Championship in Dubai are the Rolex Series events. And you heard Dom allude to the fact that the purses of $9 million are being compared to a purse of $25 million, $20 million, FedEx Cup events, $20 million. They're saying, well, you can't give the same amount of points when you're talking about different amounts of dollars. That's where I look at it and go, I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, I think, again, this is your point structure. And I'm basing this on what I hear from a lot of my friends that are past or current competitors on the DP World Tour, formerly known as the European Tour. And there is a little bit of consternation that nobody's claiming that the former European Tour is consummate with the PGA Tour, but it still, to me, hits differently when you come out with a point structure that literally says, and there's other ways you can measure this and tell me it already exists, and like, I respect that perspective, but this just came out. And you're saying, no, we're basically conceding it's not the same. Go to that graphic again for me, Andrew. So, I don't know. I bet there was a lot of debate on this and where they settled on this. I could see, if it's a Rolex Series event, I think I would have put maybe it was the World Tour Championship in Dubai, or as I said, a bonus for the person who wins the race Dubai. I think I would have put that at the same level, just to say we have events that we view as that level of stature. And then I think I probably would have done another 25. Maybe I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but that's what we do. I would have probably done 2,500 points for at least the BMW PGA Championship. That's the flagship event of the European Tour. These are your points. You're not fighting with the PGA Tour. You're not insulting anybody. It just looks like they've gone way out of their way to ensure to say, hey, majors I get. PGA Tour, though, we're not stepping on your toes. Your players and your signature events, your FedEx Cup events included, those are worth a lot more than anything we do. I don't know. Am I wrong on that? Right? So I realize this is the new big world that we're living in. But if you remember the criticism that people had for the way that the game is starting to define itself, particularly with those that are not otherwise exempt, the top 10 on the final race to Dubai points in the European Tour get membership onto the PGA Tour. Notably, Matthew Pavone is one who did that and won. He's not the only one, but I'm just giving you as an example. And the criticism was, well, have we become a feeder system now for the PGA Tour? Were you not, in essence, if you look at the stars and the flow, were you not a feeder system of the PGA Tour otherwise, in terms of at least aspiration, not with now they have a clear pathway? But I just think it hits differently when you come out with a points structure and say, no, we're flat out saying this is where we think the weight of our events stand relative to the weights of these other events that take place on the PGA Tour. Do you agree with me? It's interesting.
I'm curious if you disagree with me, Matt. I look at this and I say, this is why they keep winning the Ryder Cup, especially in Europe. They don't care about doing things that might be politically correct. They're doing what is necessary to win the Ryder Cup. And so they look at this and they go, yeah, the PGA Tour events are worth more and they're more important, and that's how it is. And we want the best players from Europe, and that's where they are, so here's our new plan. And they don't care about people complaining. They're just like, listen, this is what we need to do. So
yeah, but I actually, it's interesting you have that perspective, because mine is complete opposite of yours. I think what they did with this points is what this is politically correct. I'm not saying it's not a reflection of what reality may be in terms of the importance of one to the other, but this is their point list where they are saying the most important points should be generated. And it looks to me like they acquiesced to the PGA Tour.
How is this politically correct? They're saying that all of the PGA Tour events are more important than all of their events. It's literally what they're saying.
But I don't believe that if you are the DP World Tour, if these are your events, that you should concede that, for example, you pick it, that a signature event, by virtue of the fact that it has a larger purse, is more important than the BMW PGA Championship, which they view as the most important or the second most important event that they have on their entire schedule. The World Tour Championship in Dubai is an incredibly important event to them. That is the conclusion of their race to Dubai. So what I'm saying is I don't think there's anything wrong with having the pride and the conviction in those flagship events on your tour and saying, no, in our mind, they are equivalent to. But there was clearly a sensitivity to saying, no, don't get us wrong. We're not saying. I think that's a political correctness. They're literally saying, we're not telling you they're equivalent to a signature event. No. Even our BMW PGA Championship is a notch below that, please. It just seems to me like it was they acquiesced. And I'm looking at it going,
I just find it so ironic that they're going to build their team basically off of a PGA Tour list. I just think
that was the world list. That's how they folded it into one list. They always could have done this, but in the past they put an emphasis on playing on the DP World Tour. That was the non-politically correct thing to do, is to use your parlance with it. And so they had a separate list, and they would pull guys off that if they weren't otherwise already qualified. And then they had the world list, which was their way of saying, we have to have a world list because our top players, and more, if we'll put it in modern terms, like Rory, are playing on the PGA Tour. Jon Rahm playing on the PGA Tour. Wait, Jon Rahm? How does this impact Jon Rahm? So when it came out, Dom called me and he said, what have they done here? Have they literally built walls to keep Jon Rahm, maybe Tyrrell Hatton, from playing on their Ryder Cup team? Is this a shift? And when he called me, and you were pretty upset when you called me about it, I was like, no, it's actually the complete opposite. What does this mean for Jon Rahm? I see Tyrrell Hatton be in that mixture too, but what does this mean for Jon Rahm? That's where the big focus has been. Because Jon Rahm announces that he's going to play for LIV, remember? And almost immediately you had Rory McIlroy going, we have to have him on the European Ryder Cup team. So here's a graphic that Andrew and Dom just put together. Live players for Ryder Cup ? Jon Rahm, Tyrrell Hatton absolutely want to. In the mix, maybe Adrian Moreau, Thomas Peters has played in the Ryder Cup. David Bush, who knows, right? So relative to Jon Rahm, here is the reality. There are players, for example, like Sergio, that's not on that list because Sergio has dropped his European Tour membership. I'm out. Peace out. Out of here. Well, you have to be a member of the DP World Tour. That if we saw it on that graphic. So for Jon Rahm, it's different. Basically, the way that it works, and there is a gray area I'm about to share with you in a second because I asked Dom to pull this up. Basically, the way that this works is that if you are still a DP World Tour member and you play in non-sanctioned events, which the live events would be, then you are subject to a fine. You're also subject to a suspension. And some time ago, we were told that the suspension plays itself out in DP World Tour events, even if you weren't desiring to play in those DP World Tour events. I know it sounds a little funny to you, but take, for example, so say you wanted to play in the BMW PGA Championship, and they said, oh, no, is that what you want to play in? If that's what you want to play in, now you're suspended from that. Instead, because they didn't know where these players wanted to play in, they would suspend them from the very next European Tour event that they're otherwise not scheduled to be in. Meaning that if they decided that they wanted to play, they can't. However, to the point of the fines, those fines have to be paid to put you in good standing. Now, from what we understand of Jon Rahm, this was from last month. Jon Rahm quoted as saying, I haven't paid yet, but again, I just don't know when I'm going to play. It could very well be a chance because it hasn't been the easiest pregnancy that I just simply don't have the chance to tee off. My mind is not thinking on that right now. That's Jon Rahm talking about whether he intends to pay the fines or not. That's the way I read that. I read that by Jon Rahm saying, look, if I don't have any intention to play on the European Tour, if I'm basically saying I'm done with the Ryder Cup, this is Jon Rahm who went 3-0-1 in Rome. If Jon Rahm's saying, if I'm done with the Ryder Cup, I'm not paying the figures. I'm not paying the money, which it's speculated that his fines are well into the six figures. Now, Guy Kiddings is the chief executive of the DP World Tour. And relative to this question of whether a live player can remain a DP World Tour player, because the default presumption was that they can't because they are not able to do that on the PGA Tour. The DP World Tour never took up that position. It's very significant what I'm telling you here. The DP World Tour never said, if you play for them, you can't play for us. Here's Guy Kiddings' quote. He said, I think there's been a slight misconception because the reality is under the current rules, if a player is European and is a member of the DP World Tour and abides by the rules as they currently are, so if you don't get a release, there are sanctions, and if you accept those sanctions and take those penalties and work with that, there is no reason why players who've taken live membership but maintain membership with the DP World Tour could not A, qualify, or B, be available for selection, close quote. So you have to remember what you need to do to have membership. You have to play a minimum of 4 events, and this is outside the majors, outside of co-sanction, for example. So what Jon Rahm is saying is, with my wife's having a child in the fall, I don't know when I'm going to be able to play, but he would have to coddle together 4 events, and he would have to pay the back fines. The question is, and this is where I talked about this kind of gray area, is what are the fines? How much? So, and that's where it gets a little bit murky. Dom, I want to bring you back in here again because I asked you to look this up before we went on the air, and you said to me in the headset that you're having trouble finding the number. We had thought that the number was 100,000 pounds for each event that you competed in. In other words, a live event that you competed in that would conflict, right? But it may not be that simple. What are you seeing and hearing, Dominic?
So there's various different things coming in. Sports Illustrated says the fines were 75,000 pounds per event and also come with a 1-week DP World Tour suspension per event, which in theory would play out if and when these players attempt to go back to playing the DP World Tour events or any events at all. This from the Associated Press. The tour has already issued fines of 100,000 pounds, which is $125,000, to 17 players who played in their first 2 live golf events outside London and Portland. Now it is going after 26 players with fines that range from 12,500 pounds to 100,000 pounds for each tournament they played without a release. The tour, this is a quote from Henrik Stenson. This was a quote from last year, but again, this is when all this stuff was unfolding. Quote, the tour has taken a stand on the live events we all played in, and that left me with no decision to make, really. Stenson said he did not have an exact amount of his fine, saying only it was anywhere between 50,000 pounds, which is $62,000, and 70,000 pounds, which is 94,000 American dollars, for each live event that he played. And then I'll just read one more thing here. This came from the Telegraph. Again, different sources here, and each source has seemingly a different dollar amount, and they're ranging. The DP World Tour is poised to hit members who joined Live Golf with unprecedented fines that are up to $629,000. And if they resign their memberships, especially as it will be made clear those punishments will keep them the longer they remain in the league. And then it says, again, there's lots of stuff here. Westwood and Poulter each paid $126,000 in penalties, while Sergio Garcia, which is something that Matt referred to just a moment ago, refused to send his check, quote. Telegraph notes it believed that Liv has transferred more than $880,000 to the DP World Tour just before the Wednesday deadline. Again, this story and quote, these are in reference to stuff that happened last year. So obviously this is a moving target, but you can see, Matt, how 3 different sources are giving me not the same dollar amount and also ranges of dollar amounts. So I don't know if it is at the discretion of the DP World Tour to say, well, this player is more important or this tournament is more important, so their fine is going to be higher or lower.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. That last source that you had also implied that the sanctions, as it's called in the DP World Tour, these fines, were being paid in some way, shape, or form, whole or part, by Liv sending money. So it's really interesting. And then another one claimed that the players were stroking checks on their own. So it's fascinating. But the bottom line is that relative to focusing the discussion for this purpose on Jon Rahm can be a part of the European Ryder Cup team. In order for Jon Rahm to be a part of the European Ryder Cup team, Jon Rahm has to play in a minimum of 4 events to maintain his membership, and he has to pay the back fines. And it would seem to me that, this is my speculation solely right now, is that one of the bridges that has to be crossed in this instance is the debate that you have of whether with what you have contributed to golf at large and what you have contributed to golf on the DP World Tour, and perhaps even more so to the Ryder Cup effort therein. Is it fair to ask a player, regardless of how much money, because I know people are going to sit out there and go, well, we heard he made $300 million. We don't actually know what he got paid, but it was a lot. And if it's that much, do you stroke the check? Do you find a way to play in the 4 events? And if that's the case, if, for example, I believe the Spanish Open is in, no, the Open de España, not the Open de España. Yeah, September, isn't that September 26th, if I'm not mistaken? On the DP World Tour? Dom could check me on that. Which you'd think that that'd be something that he would want to be a part of for sure. But I would think on some level there might be a debate, again, my speculation, about a matter of principle of, let's say he owes, I don't know what it would be. Let's say it's $750,000 or $1 million or $1.5 million, whatever the number is. Because again, it seems to be a moving target. John just whispered in my ear, he has the money, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the principle of saying, are you going to spend $1.5 million to be a part of the Ryder Cup? Is that worth that to you?
So Live Golf's Tour Championship, Matt, is the same weekend as the BMW PGA Championship on the DP World Tour.
Okay.
So he obviously these Live guys
it's going to hit something.
Contracts, so they're not going to be at that event. However, to your point, the Spanish Open, or the Open de España as they call it, is the week after the BMW PGA Championship at the end of September, which also is the week after Live's Team Championship finals. So he will, or I shouldn't say that, he is certainly, in theory, available that week to go and play that event if he so chooses.
Save for whatever's going on with his wife having the baby or what have you.
He's going to be on the, no one else on the Live Tour matters for the Ryder Cup other than Jon Rahm, in my opinion. And they're going to find a way to get him on the team.
I think Tyrrell Hatton is a good one to have a discussion
maybe. But the reality is,
I realize
I don't know about all these details, but I know Jon Rahm is going to be on a Ryder Cup team.
John was the one.
I don't care how they do it. It's going to happen.
Exactly. John was the one that when he went, literally Rory was like, he's got to be on a team. Hey, what do you think about Jon Rahm joining Live? He's got to be on a Ryder Cup team. Got to figure it out.
We're going to figure out a way to do it.
And there seems to be...
I don't know how it works. I don't know anything about fines. I don't know anything about anything, but I know he'll be on a Ryder Cup team.
And there seems to be on the U.S. side, I don't know how it's going to play itself out, because this was the initial press conference with Keegan Bradley, and somebody, one of the scribes, like, Keegan, what do you think about the guys who went to Live? And he was like, again, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, I want the best players in my team, full stop. Now, I don't know after he did that, if a bunch of the people huddled later on were like, what are we going to do about this now? Right? Because early on, when poor Zach Johnson was asked that question, he had a him and haw on it about who would get on the team and who didn't. He was like, well, they can qualify, but the only way they can qualify is if they make enough points during the majors, right? Which maybe Bryson's going to do now. Instead of Brooks this time, it'll be Bryson. So we'll see how it plays itself out.